Abandoned by my family at 15 because of my step-siblings' lies. 10 years later, they're begging for my forgiveness after seeing my success. Hi, I'm a 27-year-old guy caught in a bizarre situation right now, and I'm hoping to get your thoughts on whether I'm the a-hole. 10 years ago, my dad and stepmom kicked me out of the house, and now they've resurfaced, asking for my help. Let me give you some background before you judge. Growing up, life was pretty simple. My mom passed away when I was young, leaving just me and my dad. He worked hard to provide for us, and I always admired his dedication. However, when I was 15, everything changed. He remarried Christine, a woman with 2 kids, Sophia and Liam, who were my age. At first, I hoped for a new family dynamic, but that quickly soured. Christine's children were spoiled and entitled, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. They would often bully me, turning my father against me, who had once been my greatest supporter. Whenever I was around them, I felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to avoid their ridicule. Things escalated at school, where I was bullied by Sophia and Liam and their friends. They spread false rumors that I was a thief, claiming I stole their things at home. The irony was that they were the ones who often took my belongings. Liam, in particular, would steal money from my stash. I remember one time I saved up to buy a new video game, only to find it missing from my room. When I confronted my dad, he sided with them, claiming I must have lost it. Liam told me he saw you spending your lunch money on weed, my dad had said. I was horrified. I tried to explain, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. Sophia chimed in, reinforcing the lie. Yeah, I saw him too, Dad, she said with a smirk. My father, blinded by the influence of Christine and her kids, punished me by cutting my lunch allowance for weeks. I remember those days vividly, walking into the cafeteria with a knot in my stomach. My friends would be sharing pizza, chips, and sodas, while I had to watch from the sidelines. My stomach would growl, and I'd try to focus on my studies, but the hunger pangs were relentless. The only reason I survived school during that time was thanks to my friend Mark. He came from a humble background and didn't have much money himself, but he always shared his lunch with me. Peanut butter sandwiches that his mom made. Those sandwiches became my lifeline, but I felt ashamed and defeated. Why don't you just tell your dad the truth? Mark would ask, concern etched on his face. I shook my head, knowing my father wouldn't believe me. Even if I did, I didn't want to bring any more trouble to Mark. Then, there was my mother's pocket watch, the only keepsake I had left from her. It was one of the few things that meant the world to me. One day, I noticed it was missing from my room. I immediately knew who had taken it. When I confronted Sophia, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Prove it." I was furious, but I knew I couldn't go to my parents. They wouldn't listen, not after everything else. Christine would just side with her kids, and my dad, well, he wasn't the man he used to be. Since marrying Christine, he'd become someone else. Cold, distant, and willing to believe any lie as long as it came from her or her children. It was like my father had been replaced by a stranger. The breaking point came one fateful night. Liam had a tantrum and smashed the TV while I was out. When I returned home, Christine was waiting for me, fury written all over her face. "This is your fault, Aaron," she screamed. My dad stood there, arms crossed, and instead of defending me, he told me I needed to find my own way. "Maybe it's time you figured things out on your own, Aaron," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. In that moment, I felt completely abandoned. They handed me $200 and kicked me out, smirking as I packed my things. I felt angry, betrayed, and helpless. I wanted to scream, to lash out at the family that had thrown me away. But I had nowhere to go. I had lost everything: my home, my family, and any semblance of stability. The only person I could think of was Mark. I showed up at his house, my heart heavy with despair. "What happened?" he asked, his eyes wide with concern. I broke down, telling him everything. His parents were understanding and welcomed me with open arms, despite the pain I felt. They wanted to talk to my family, especially my dad, but when they tried, they were met with hostility. Christine told them to leave, even threatening to call the cops. Mark's parents were kind people and never held it against me, but I felt terrible for putting them in that position. "You don't need to drop out of school," they said. "We'll support you just like we support Mark." I hugged them tightly, tears streaming down my face, overwhelmed by their kindness. Mark and I went to school together, but word about my situation quickly spread. The bullying escalated. People called me names, and I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. "Hey, thief," they would yell, and I just walked past trying to ignore them. Mark, who was also bullied, stood by me, but I could see how the situation affected him too. Sophia and Liam's influence reached even further, with their friends jumping on the bandwagon. They started making fun of Mark for hanging out with the loser. I felt a deep sense of guilt for dragging him into my mess. We decided we needed a fresh start and change schools. However, the financial burden weighed heavily on me. I couldn't rely on Mark and his family forever, so I took a part-time job waiting tables to support myself. Mark's parents insisted that I didn't need to worry about paying rent. They were already doing so much for me. They encouraged me to save my money for college, reminding me that my education was the priority. I felt a wave of gratitude for their understanding and support. Despite working long hours, I found it hard to make ends meet. I'd often skip meals to save money, reliving those painful cafeteria days. Mark would sometimes notice and try to sneak me food, but I always insisted I was fine. Mark and I became inseparable, visiting his grandparents on weekends. They were also kind people, always encouraging me. But college felt like a distant dream for both of us. I worked tirelessly, saving every penny, determined to make something of myself despite the odds stacked against me. Eventually, I saved enough to rent a small room and moved out of Mark's home. It was a bittersweet moment. I felt a sense of pride, but also immense loneliness. I watched Mark leave for a different state, and it felt like I was losing my only support system. Over the years, I struggled working various odd jobs to make ends meet. I didn't go to college, but I learned from every experience. I finally landed a job as an assistant at a small startup. My hard work paid off when my boss noticed my dedication and promoted me. It felt incredible to finally be recognized for my efforts. Through relentless perseverance, I started my own tech company. It was a tough journey, but I was proud of what I achieved, especially considering where I came from. I refused to let my past define me. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, I received an unexpected email from my dad. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, and I was shocked to read his apology. He wanted to meet, and my heart raced with a mix of anger and curiosity. I agreed, but when we met, it wasn't just him. He brought Christine, Sophia, and Liam. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. They looked uncomfortable, not in an apologetic way, but more like they were caught in a web of their own making. My dad explained that they had fallen on hard times. Their business had gone under, and now they were struggling financially. He had the audacity to ask for my help. I was speechless. After everything they put me through, kicking me out, leaving me to fend for myself, they thought I would just forgive and forget. I told them outright that I had no intention of helping those who had abandoned me when I needed them most. "I've struggled for years, and not one of you reached out to see if I was okay," I said, my voice steady. My dad tried to argue that they had made mistakes, that they were different now. Christine kept saying that family sticks together, but I wasn't buying it. "Family?" I echoed. "You threw me away when it was convenient for you. Now that you're in trouble, you think I'm going to swoop in and save you?" "No." As they left, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had stood up for myself after all those years. But as the days passed, doubt crept in. Maybe I was being too harsh. After all, they were my family. But deep down, I felt justified in my decision. They had made their choices, and now I was living with mine. In the years that followed, I made it a point to give back to those who had truly supported me. Mark's family had become my own. I remembered how Mark's parents had taken me in when I had nowhere to go, feeding me, caring for me, and treating me like one of their own. They had stood by me at my lowest, so when I found success, I made it a priority to help them in return. I paid for Mark's college tuition and set up a scholarship fund in his name, ensuring that he never had to face the struggles I endured. I told him, "You're my real family. Your parents are my real family. They were there when I had nothing." I wanted them to know how much they meant to me, so I often visited and brought them little gifts as tokens of my appreciation. My father called me once more and in a heated conversation, I finally confronted my dad directly, telling him, "You were not the father you were supposed to be. You were wrong for not supporting me when I needed you the most. I feel disappointed calling you my father." And then I disconnected the call and blocked him for good. It was cathartic saying those words. I finally let go of the anger that had been building up inside me for years. So, here I am, reflecting on this mess of a situation. I'm happy with where I am now, surrounded by those who truly care about me.